Have you ever watched a horror movie alone at night, and suddenly you felt like the movie was becoming real? I know it sounds silly, but imagine this. You're sitting alone in the living room. The lights are dim, the only glow comes from the TV, and then, something crawls out of the screen. If you were in my position that night, what would you do? Close your eyes, run, or refuse to believe what you just saw? Here's the story. At that time, I had just moved into an old apartment on the outskirts of Chicago. From the outside, the building looked sturdy, but once you stepped inside, the atmosphere felt different. The hallways were long and silent, the paint on the walls was peeling, and every time I walked through, the sound of my own footsteps echoed back at me. I had seen a few neighbors, but most of them were elderly people who rarely came outside. The place gave off a strange aura, like it was holding onto old stories that were never told. That night, the clock had already passed 11. I was sitting alone in the living room. A cup of instant coffee I had made earlier was already cold on the table. I had turned off the lamp on purpose to make the mood calmer, so the only light came from the TV screen. From outside the window, I could faintly hear the wind blowing hard, making the branches of the trees in front of the building scrape against each other like fingernails scratching glass. At first, I was watching a talk show, something light to ease the loneliness. But suddenly, without me touching anything, the TV screen changed. The talk show disappeared, replaced by black and white static and a loud shush sound. The noise was so sharp it made the hairs on my neck stand up. I immediately grabbed the remote and tried switching channels. Once, twice, 3 times, it was all the same. Only static, no picture. I started to feel uneasy. I thought maybe the cable had come loose or the provider was having issues. But then, behind the static, something appeared. Faint at first, the silhouette of a woman. It started out blurry, like a shadow formed by the black and white lines on the screen. But slowly it became clearer. Her hair was long and messy, covering almost all of her face. Her skin was very pale, almost gray, like someone who hadn't felt sunlight in a very long time. I squinted, trying to convince myself it was just a coincidence. Maybe an old film clip that suddenly came on. But one thing didn't make sense. I wasn't even on a movie channel. The remote was still in my hand, and the screen stayed locked on that figure. My chest felt tight, my breathing grew faster. I tried to calm myself, but my body reacted the opposite way. My palms were cold, sweat dripped down my temples. The air in the living room suddenly felt much colder than just a few minutes before. When I looked back at the screen, the woman moved. Very slowly, her head tilted to one side, then turned slightly. Even though her face was still covered by hair, I could feel her eyes staring directly at me. It was like an invisible connection held me in place, making it impossible to look away. And then, her hand lifted. Thin, pale, with long fingers that looked like the bones were poking out under her skin. Her hand moved closer to the screen, and I almost couldn't believe what I saw next. The tip of her finger touched the TV glass. I blinked, hoping I was seeing it wrong. But no, her fingertip actually pressed against the surface of the screen, and the screen rippled. Like water touched by a pebble. Small waves spread around her finger. I froze. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. I could only stare as her hand slowly pushed through, passing the screen as if the TV glass was nothing more than a thin layer of water. One hand, then the other. The static grew louder, mixed with strange whispers echoing somewhere deep inside the room. The woman started crawling out. Her shoulders appeared, then her upper body followed. Her movements were stiff, her bones creaking like joints forced to move after being locked for years. And in that moment, I realized she was no longer just a shadow on the screen. She was in my living room. Her hands were already out. Her shoulders followed, and now, almost her entire body was crawling out of the TV. The sound of her stiff bones cracking filled the air, sending chills through me. It was as if her body was being forced to move in impossible ways. I sat frozen on the couch. The remote that had fallen earlier was lying on the floor, just a few inches from my foot. But I didn't even dare bend down to pick it up. It felt like my body was locked in place by fear, my breathing ragged, my heart pounding so hard my chest hurt. The woman paused for a moment, still half crouched on the floor. Her long black hair hung over her face, some strands sticking wetly to her pale skin, as if she had just been submerged in water. From her hair, dark liquid dripped, staining my wooden floor. I swallowed hard, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination. But then I smelled it, the metallic, pungent scent of blood. Slowly, her head turned. Her hair shifted, revealing parts of her face bit by bit. Her skin was pale, cracked in places like old ceramic, and her eyes. God, her eyes, black, completely black, as if there was no light inside them at all. It felt like staring into a bottomless void, one that could swallow every bit of courage I had left. She started moving forward, crawling across the wooden floor of my living room. Her movements were slow but steady, her hands clawing at the floor with long, blackened nails. The sound, scritch, scritch, pierced my ears, sharp and unbearable. I could feel the faint vibration in the floor every time her nails scraped against it. I wanted to scream, I wanted to run, but it was like my entire body was paralyzed. My throat locked up, only panicked breaths escaping. My hands trembled violently, as if I had lost all control over my own body. The figure was now only a few steps away from me. She stopped, then slowly tilted her head upward. Her hair fell back, revealing her face completely. Her pale, cracked skin, her bluish lips, and from the corner of her mouth dripped a dark liquid. Her eyes remained fixed on me, and then, for the first time, she opened her mouth. A cracking sound echoed, like an old door being forced open. From her mouth came a whisper, faint but sharp enough to pierce my ears. "I see you." I froze, but it wasn't just a whisper. The voice echoed directly inside my head. It was as if she wasn't speaking with her mouth, but planting the words straight into my mind. I felt my head throbbing, my eyes burning, the hairs on my body standing on end. She crawled closer, now less than 2 meters away from me. Her thin hand began to rise, her long nails pointing directly at my face. I could see the details clearly, the cracked, bony fingers, stained with something dark, whether it was dirt, blood, or something much worse. I held my breath. Every second dragged on. I knew it was only a matter of time before she actually touched me. And the scariest part, as she drew closer, I felt like it wasn't just my body that was terrified. Something deep inside me whispered, "Don't look into her eyes. If you stared too long, you'll never come back." I couldn't take it anymore. With the last bit of strength I had left, I jumped off the sofa and ran toward the apartment door. My hands were trembling violently as I grabbed the handle, sweat mixing with a cold that cut deep into my bones. My heart felt like it was about to explode. I twisted the handle roughly, and the door swung open. At that very second, the static noise from the TV suddenly stopped. The room went silent, so quiet that I could hear the ticking of the wall clock crystal clear. I slowly turned my head. The living room was empty. No woman crawling on the floor, no dark stains, no scratch marks. The TV was back to airing the talk show I had ignored earlier. I stood at the doorway, gasping for breath. Half of me wanted to run outside, but the other half was still trying to think rationally. Maybe I'm just exhausted. Maybe my mind is playing tricks on me. I closed the door gently, leaned against it for a moment, and tried to steady my breathing. But something felt wrong. That metallic, bloody smell was still there, faint yet sharp against my nose. And the room was still cold, way too cold. I shivered. That uneasy feeling crept back in. Then I suddenly remembered. I had installed a small security camera in the living room, facing the sofa. I decided to check the footage. If what I saw earlier was just a hallucination, the camera wouldn't capture anything. With trembling hands, I grabbed my phone and opened the CCTV app. The screen lit up, showing the recording, and my heart nearly stopped. I saw myself, sitting on the sofa, watching TV with a tense face. But I wasn't alone. That woman was there, sitting right beside me. Her long hair covered part of her face, her head tilted slightly, her eyes staring directly at the camera. And her lips, stretched into a wide smile. A smile that wasn't human, too wide, torn all the way to her cheeks, revealing rows of sharp, blackened teeth. From her mouth, a dark liquid dripped down, staining the floor right next to my feet. I dropped my phone. The screen cracked, but the sound from the CCTV app kept playing, static mixed with whispers. Panicked, I tried to open the door again, but the handle was now locked tight, as if something outside was holding it shut. I shook the door, screamed, but it was useless. Then, the TV in the living room flickered back on. The screen was blank, dark, but on that screen, I could see a faint reflection of the room. And in it, I could see myself standing at the door. The problem was, I wasn't alone in that reflection. The woman was standing right behind me. Her hair dangled over her face, her hand raised, her long fingers almost touching my shoulder. I quickly turned around. No one was there. The room was empty. But when I looked back at the TV, she was already closer, her lips nearly brushing against my ear. Terrified, I stumbled back, and suddenly the TV changed. It wasn't a reflection anymore, it was a recording. I saw myself, sleeping on the sofa. My face looked peaceful, as if none of what just happened had ever occurred. But in that recording, the woman was standing beside me, leaning down toward me, whispering something in my ear. I stared at the screen in horror, and then, the version of me on the TV opened his eyes. His eyes were pitch black, identical to hers. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The lights in the room went out. The TV was the only source of light left, and for the last time before everything went completely dark, I saw one thing. On that screen, I was no longer myself. I was sitting still on the sofa, with that wide smile, staring straight into the camera.